All right, we're good. And that will just be for all of you to reference and then also to share with anyone who might not be able to join. So I am going to pop up my screen. Can you all see the screen okay? All right. And I will say before we dive into the content, I like to make any of my interactions and workshops very engaging and casual in a sense that you can interrupt at any time, ask questions, ask for clarification, let me know if something doesn't make sense. So please feel free to chime in either verbally or in the chat. I sometimes don't see the like virtual hand raise when I have the screen share going on. So just shout out or put something in the chat if you do have a question or want to talk about anything in more detail. But we are going to be talking about ways that we can increase our productivity through prioritization of what the work that we do, which is what we will call initiatives, which relates to like projects or tasks, and the goals that we set. So before we dive into that, I will preface it by saying that there are a lot of terms for goals. There's a lot of methodologies, acronyms. Laura was mentioning when she first joined, I think we use SMART goals, but there's all sorts of other acronyms. There's SMART goals, there's OKRs, there's MBRs, there's the EOS model, which uses rocks, and then there's just the plain old word for goals. So we are going to be I'm just going to use the term goal generally, and you can apply that to whatever methodology you use or whatever specific term you like to use. So the first piece that we will ground in on is the kind of building of the goals process. So the methodology that I personally teach and love is OKR, so objectives and key results. But the objective is essentially the broader goal, the statement of intent. And that's something that has usually about a year time span, sometimes even more, and is that aspirational, inspirational vision type of goal that gets you excited and makes you want to achieve it. Some of the people that I work with say like the objective should be that double shot of espresso, something that's motivating you towards the end state that you want to get to. The key results are all about metrics. So if you do use SMART goals, you know that there's that measurable piece, the M component of SMART, and that's what the key results are. We want to make sure that we have some numbers incorporated in our goal setting so we can actually hold each other accountable and indicate whether we're making forward progress or not. And then the piece that we'll concentrate on most today is the initiatives. And those are the actions or the work that we do every single day in order to get us closer to achieving our objectives or our end state goal. And the reason I like to focus on initiatives is because this is often the forgotten child in the goal setting family. A lot of people set their vision statement, they set their goals, they have their metrics, and then we stop there and don't actually get to the point of being very intentional about how we align and prioritize our work to actually meet our goals. The first piece that I will share a little bit about is the difference between cascading and aligning. So the cascading mentality that most of you have probably heard of before or experienced in your professional career is high-level leadership team sets the goals and then cascades it down to their direct reports, usually, director level. For you, it may be, senior partner or managing partner level. And then they cascade it down to their teams and so on and so forth. So the cascading is kind of like think about like a waterfall, starting at the top, and then we go layer by layer by layer. So every team does technically have goals that relate to the higher level company goals or the executive leadership team goals. And then it goes one layer deeper. But the challenge with that is that the people who are in deeper layers within the organization don't necessarily have the ability to provide input or share their perspective on the actual goals. They're kind of given to them. They're communicated to teams or employees, and just these are the goals. Now, here's what you need to do to contribute to it. With alignment, we look at it in the reverse way. And this essentially means that yes, the executive team still sets their overall vision and goals, and there is an element of cascading where we share that with the organization, but we share that with the organization or the team in a way that says, this is what Husch Blackwell wants to accomplish this year. Now let's have a discussion around your work and how do you think your work fits into these overall goals or objectives. And if it doesn't, or we aren't quite sure how it aligns, let's have a discussion around what we may need to shift in order to help you see that similarity or that engagement, or what might you need to start doing that we aren't currently doing in order to better align with their goals. So there's more of that discussion, engagement, and impact, which allows team members farther down into the organization to feel a bit more motivated to actually accomplish the goals, and it allows them to see themselves in the bigger picture of the organization. So I'll pause here for a second. Based on all of your experience, how would you say goals have been communicated to you in the past? Have you experienced more general cascading, or have you experienced some alignment?
Cascade,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a for-profit law firm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Laura. The focus is definitely on cascading.
Okay. And what has been the impact that you've seen either for yourselves personally or for your team in terms of like that clarity around what you actually are supposed to do and how that aligns to the goals? Has it been a little fuzzy?
The goal, oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Katarina.
I was gonna say, I do think that the goal is clear, the path to get there is not always so clear, or it's inconsistent because a lot of the decision making within our organization is subjective. So
1000%. Or based on things wholly out of your control, but are treated as things that only you can control.
Yes, yes. And I will totally acknowledge the fact that probably none of us in this room have the ability to set the goals for the entire Husch Blackwell law firm, for the entire company, or even for your specific segment. However, what we do have control over, where we're focusing on today, is what we actually do and how we make choices in what we do and the type of work that we pursue every day in relation to those goals. So in doing that, we'll get specific on like, what is an initiative? An initiative is essentially just task, project, program, an activity, whatever type of word that you want to do, what that you want to use to define the work that you're doing. And the big pieces around the initiative are that it does have a dedicated owner. So as a team, when we talk about team goals or team activities that we are going to do to help us meet the metrics that are maybe given to us from senior level leadership, we then ask ourselves, well, what does this mean for us? Who is owning this? Who's responsible for driving this forward? And how do we think that this will help achieve the overall goal for the company, or for your department? And we don't necessarily know the answer. We can't know exactly what the output's going to be, but we can have a discussion of what we intend the outcome to be and define some acceptance criteria, which is essentially, what does the definition of done look like? What does success look like? So then when we do reach that state of success, or that accomplishment of an initiative, a task or a project, we can look back and say, all right, we completed this, it was successful. How do our metrics look? Have we been able to make progress towards increasing the metrics, whether it's a certain metric on, percentage of billable hours, or the amount of time that you're spending on doing a particular task. And if the metrics are, either not moving or moving, then we have the ability to say, okay, we completed this. Either we are seeing the results that we really want to see, so that's great, we're on track. We know we want to continue to do more of what we are doing, or we're not seeing the results from a metric standpoint. Let's then rearrange and discuss what we might need to change in terms of our initiatives and the work that we're doing in order to get more progress towards our metrics. So to make this a little bit more tangible, I'll share an activity with you, and I will preface it by saying, usually if I facilitate this full activity with a team, we do it probably in about a 90-minute type of workshop. So we're not going to do full activity for all of you today, but I want to give a little teaser or a taste of it. And then you'll have the slides and the information, and you can decide if you want to either do it as this internal team or take it to other teams. So the team initiative alignment workshop or activity basically looks at what the overall goals are, and then what you want to stop, start, continue, and where you want to grow in terms of meeting those goals. So for an example, can one of you share one of the higher level goals that you have, either for Husch Blackwell in general or for your specific team? Just as an example.
I can share one.
Okay.
I'd like to generate at least $100,000 from one of my clients in the next year.
Okay. And is that a personal goal, or is that kind of coming down from senior levels above you wanting you to do that?
I actually would qualify this more as a personal goal.
Okay.
Yeah. As a level 2 associate, it's not expected of me to do that, certainly.
Okay. Yes. And that's a good example that we can go with. I want to also make sure that we can have something that relates to everyone. So while that is like a really good example, I want to make sure that we can go through the initiatives in a way that everyone can kind of tangibly see how they connect. So do the rest of you kind of have a goal similar to that if we use, revenue generation? Is that something we can all relate to if we use that as an example?
Probably a more realistic example would be meeting the new hour expectation of 1,900 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's use that. Yes. And I know it takes a little while to get used to this. So let's just use the hour expectation. 1,900 hours, you said, right? And is that in a month or?
That's in a year.
A year. Okay. I was gonna say that would be a lot. So yes, hours expectation for the year. So the first piece, the stop piece for this is, what trade-offs do you think you'll need to make to be able to dedicate more time and energy towards meeting that goal of 1,900 hours? Are there activities that you need to stop or offload, or that need to go away in order to help you meet that goal? Can anyone think of anything that they might need to stop?
I know I'd be more productive if I put my phone in a skiff, and we don't have skiffs because those are for big secret government people. But a metaphorical skiff, I think that would probably help me a lot.
Okay. Help focus.
I know some of us can relate to, we get asked to do a lot of things at our job that are non-billable, and we're encouraged to say yes to those, but sometimes they just keep coming back for more and more of our time, and it makes it very hard to build the right amount of hours.
Yes. And that's a really good point too, because if we have it in our, like, constantly in our mind, even putting like a sticky note on your laptop, 1,900 hours, then you can think to yourself, what am I doing today? and what should I say no to in order to meet that goal? And you can just ask that question with that piece in mind. The start piece is what new projects, tasks, actions you want to take that can help you contribute to this. Is there anything new that any of you want to start doing that could help you meet the 1900 hours goal?
Go ahead, Caitlin.
Oh, sorry, non-partner Sarah. I want to start prioritizing work that comes with a snowballing effect that builds on more work instead of the one-off research projects.
Okay. And what are some of the indications that you have that work could snowball? Are there ways that you can, and I'm asking these questions not to challenge you, but more, well, I guess in a way challenge you, but in a way just to like get us thinking about how we can get really specific in holding ourselves accountable. So, yes.
No, I appreciate that. It's depends on the time that I'm brought into a project. If it's an early bring in time or a later time, depending on who's already on the team. If it's already a full team, then I know my work will be little to none. If I'm stepping in for somebody, then I'm going to be, stepping out when they come back and they return to that work. I think those are some of would be the triggers for me.
Yes, yes. And that's awesome because sometimes, you have the triggers, you have the indicators, and sometimes, that doesn't necessarily lead to what we're thinking. So going back to, this piece on the initiative, that's a really good example because you can say, okay, here's the acceptance criteria. Here's what I think will lead to success, leading to more work coming or the snowball effect. And then you can make the choice and evaluate, okay, did it or did it not? And that helps you get more and more clear throughout the year. So you're able to then hone in on, getting more specific about choosing the work. So yes, good example. Sarah, George, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think for me, I get so like set in a mindset of like work happening during like set hours, and to an extent that's true because like we have to be responsive. But like if I want to work on a Saturday morning because it's quiet and I know it'll make my Monday better, like I want to feel okay about that and not be like, oh, you're compromising some sort of boundary. So maybe just like having a more flexible mindset of like, I do get to work at odd hours, and sometimes that can be a good thing because it gives me freedom later on.
And so that would help by helping you reach the 1900 hours maybe faster if you were working at different times.
Or it just like adds less pressure if I need to like take part of an afternoon off for an activity. Like I know that I have a flexible mindset about when I work, so it's not like I have to work that night to catch up.
Okay. Yes. And that's a good example. And we can get even kind of a layer more specific with that by saying, I am going to commit to putting in, 40 hours a week. Let's just take the standard 40 hours a week. And if you want to get, really intentional about it, you can start tracking and saying, okay, on Tuesday, I only worked 5 hours because I had to pick, my kid up from school early. And so that means I want to make up 3 extra hours on Saturday morning. And the reason I'm kind of challenging us to get really specific in our minds of how we want to hold each other accountable or how we want to hold ourselves accountable is because then it makes it easier and easier to help us determine if we're actually doing what we said we want to do. What about continue? Usually this one is a little bit easier than the stop and the start because it looks at work that we're currently doing. So what is something that you are currently doing that you think you want to continue to help meet this 1900 hours goal?
I have for a while now have been time blocking on my calendar the day before. Just to make sure that I can add that up the day before and make sure that that's going to equate to the number of hours I need to reach that day. Obviously there's some changes that need to happen as the day progresses because things are unpredictable, but it is a practice that has helped me stay on track in terms of meeting my hours.
Okay, that's awesome. Yes, the time blocking piece helps for sure. Any other actions? What, think about like the specific work that you do, whether it's, using a particular system or, making phone calls or, the actual like nature of the work. Is there specific actions that you want to continue taking?
So Caitlin, this doesn't directly answer the prompt you just gave, but I was thinking about this as Katarina was talking. Something else I've been trying to focus on more too is in those instances where maybe I can't hit the target that I'm expecting for that day or something pops up, I'm trying to allow myself forgiveness and not stress out about it because I realize it's kind of a cyclical event then where I'm not as productive the next time.
Yes, yes, exactly. And that's an important factor too, that kind of goes into this next piece around grow. You may have heard of like the stop, start, continue exercise before, because that's something that a lot of organizations just use. I like to add the grow piece because it gets into those mindset components out of the soft skills. So the grow piece is, I think that ties into what you were saying, Courtney, of this is the mindset that I want to continue to develop in myself that I know will help me get closer to the 1900 hours goal. Are there other soft skills or competencies or mindsets that you all want to try to exhibit to help you with this?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like being able to acknowledge, like, oh, I'm feeling very stressed out in this moment. Like, does my feelings actually match reality? Like, do they match up, or should I just maybe take a 10-minute break because that will actually make me more productive on the back end than if I just power through and say, like, I've just got to keep working because there's so much to do. So, like, forcing myself to pause and kind of take stock of where I am. I'm not very good at that most days.
Yes. Yes, just being a little more mindful, a little more present. Yes. Yes,
Are we
and some
talking
other examples. Oh, sorry, go
right
ahead.
now, Caitlin? Or are we talking about competencies in your last piece, or are we still talking about continue?
We can flex between both. We kind of let into the grow, but yes, feel free to add something on the continue piece.
Well, this is raising for me things that I'm trying to get better at. And it's right now, one of the things that I feel like I'm not great about is the quickness of responsive time that clients and my colleagues expect. And so in order to free up time to really manage my inbox better, I have to release control of other things. And sometimes that comes easily. I can think of a case I'm on right now where someone's running it completely by themselves and just doing a better job than me. And then Caitlin. And I can also think of places where I could be way better at explaining what I need and then releasing control, so that I can, be the responsive manager that people are expecting me to be. But when my inbox is crazy and I miss stuff constantly, I think people get nervous, and it doesn't allow for that continue piece that we talked about, that snowball where you just become the point person for someone or for a client. And I think that's what we have to all strive to do, is be so good that people just trust us implicitly, and then the work just flows and flows and flows.
Yes, yes. Developing that trust and the relationship building is helpful. And then getting really specific on like, what are the actions that I'm going to take to help develop trust, either with internal stakeholders or external stakeholders? What are those particular activities that help to build that versus maybe activities that don't, or actions that don't? Anything else that anyone wants to add on really any of these, the stop, start, continue, or grow? All right. So like I said, very easy, small taste, but you get the idea. And what I typically advise that teams do is to take, if there are goals that, your team kind of collectively has that comes from higher levels of the organization, write those all out on a whiteboard, virtual whiteboard or, physical whiteboard if you happen to be able to be in person at any point this year. And then go through the stop, start, continue, and grow for each goal. The grow piece can kind of maybe relate to all of them in general, but you can do it for each goal and say, okay, here's what I'm going to stop doing, here's what I'm going to start doing, and then here's what I want to continue. And then the big piece around that is having the next part of the discussion in how do you believe that your initiatives will contribute towards the success of the goal that it aligns to. So being able to clearly explain, I am going to do X, and that is going to increase my number of hours each week by five hours in order to help me achieve the 1900 hours goal for the year. And that is because, if the X is I'm going to time block and turn, my email on do not disturb while I'm working on this case for 2 hours, that's going to help me because I'm going to be able to make farther progress on the case without being distracted by email. And then you check in with yourself and check in with each other as a team to say, how did you do last week? How did you do on your action? Well, some weeks I did really awesome. I was great and I was diligent about sticking to my time blocks. And other weeks it might be, well, I set the time blocks, but I did not follow them. And then have the discussion around, well, how did that impact the amount of hours that you build for that week? And how did it make you feel? I like to bring the emotional piece into it as well, because we are all humans and humans come with emotions. And maybe we, hit our targets and hit our metrics and we got more hours in 1 week than we ever had before, but we feel depleted and burnt out and a little bit bitter or resentful. So that's not a good place to be in either. So we have to flux between those two pieces. And then if the project does not clearly align or the task does not clearly align and we're having trouble making that connection, then we have that open discussion of, well, should we really be doing this? And that can be a hard discussion for teams, especially around work or habits or tasks that we've been used to doing for a long time. But having that discussion I've found is really beneficial because it allows us to think more expansively. Well, we don't really want to be doing this. Can we offload it to a different team, or can we delegate, or can we use automation to make things more efficient? What are some of the solutions that we can try to free up more of our time to focus on the things that will help us get closer to those 1900 hours? So everything is aligned to that end state goal. But the interim periods and the continuous iteration pieces of it are just the consistent check-ins to gauge what happened, what did we do? What was the result? How are we feeling about it? And using all of that data to then say, what do I want to do next? Do I continue in this next week? Do I shift something? Do I try something a little bit different? And if we get into that pattern and that cycle throughout the year, then it becomes a lot less stressful to think, well, I'm going to do my very best and hope that by the end of the year I've reached 1900 hours. But it puts a little bit more ownership and control and that sense of agency on us. How does that land with all of you? Does it make sense? All right, I see some head nods. It can be a little bit challenging to just shift that mindset in the beginning. So I will remind us that the mindset is a huge piece of this. I'm sure you've all heard the term growth mindset before because it is a very popular term these days. But essentially that just means believing that we can constantly learn, and that failure does not mean that we're doomed forever and ever. It just is an opportunity to get curious about what we might need to do differently. So when we think about this mindset, it says to embrace the red as learning opportunity. And I'll show you, there's a red, yellow, green stoplight method that I'll show you on the next slide. But it allows us to embrace things that are not going very well as learning. It allows us to get curious versus judging ourselves as others as not productive, or not trying very hard, or any of the judgments that might come. It allows us to celebrate small wins because we are consistently looking at our progress along the way. We're not waiting till the end of the year to say, oh, we're at 1855 hours instead of 1900. Well, bummer, we didn't meet the goal. We're looking at it on a week-to-week basis and say, oh, wow, this week was better than last week. That's awesome. That's a small win. Let's celebrate it. It means that we all contribute to each other. So even if it is a personal goal, there are ways that we can support each other or give each other tips or help each other prioritize or strategize our work. So we're all ultimately contributing to the larger goal. And I would ask, as part of maybe a takeaway that you all can discuss is, why is the 1900 hours important to the firm? What does it get the firm? Is it purely just about profitability? Or is it about outstanding customer service? Is it about gaining new business? It might be a combination of things, but having that higher level piece kind of makes it a little bit more inspirational. So then you understand why the hours requirement is important.
Caitlin, can I ask a follow-up question here?
Yes.
So I think this group in particular does a good job of embracing a lot of what's on the slide and helping our mindsets. Like, we do celebrate small wins or encourage each other, try to validate each other's wins and bring that out. And definitely the piece you mentioned about checking in on work. This is sort of like a work and emotional support group. I would say it has two prongs. But I do think the curiosity versus judgment one is hard, because maybe it's because we're all high achievers, type A people. So when things don't go the way they're supposed to, it doesn't make sense. I'll speak for myself. It doesn't make sense. And then I'm questioning, then maybe my instinct is to be like, well, what's wrong with over there? Because I don't do a good job of being curious. Is there a mindset shift that we could think about there to help ourselves get through those bumps in the road?
So the question I like to ask to help just shift this perspective is, how might we, or how might I like the we component because it does bring the team into the picture, because we do all contribute to each other's work. So rather than looking for blame or causation, which is probably in every human nature our ultimate go-to strategy when something doesn't go our way, we either blame ourselves, we blame other people, we blame external factors. We try to find that reason and that cause, and that's because naturally we want to find a solution. We want to problem solve right away. I encourage people, instead of jumping right to the solutioning or the action taking by finding all the evidence of what went wrong and what we need to do differently, to get curious and ask, how might we be able to increase our hours for the next month? Or how might we be able to better satisfy this client? Or how might we be able to be more efficient on this case? And that allows us to think about a variety of different solutions and get in that more proactive, creative brain space than looking back on the past and finding indications of what we did wrong and then going for solutions from that perspective. Certainly it's helpful to look back and get data. But that's at least the tip that I found most helpful for shifting to curiosity. Does that help?
It does, but it is so opposite of how our lawyer brains are wired.
Oh, yes. I'm not saying any of this is easy.
Like, the way we are trained to think about our clients' problems what I hear you saying has to be slightly different than the way we approach our own personal, challenges. which I
Mhm.
think will take intentionality.
Yes, yes. And it can be a both and, you know, we certainly can, there is a time, and it's not that all judgment and blame is bad, you know, there's certainly a time and place to say, okay, this went wrong, that was a mistake. Now let's learn from it and move on. But we can weave some curiosity into that. And I think having a peer accountability group and support group, which it sounds like this group is fabulous, because when we hear each other using that sort of language in meetings, we can stop ourselves and say, okay, Sarah, you know, I get it. You know, this case didn't go as planned. Yes, let's do maybe a quick retrospective and talk about what we could do differently and what we learned. Let's also get just a little bit more curious and get that creative space in to think about new solutions. So we can hold each other accountable for weaving some of that in, even if it's nearly impossible to do constantly. The last piece I'll show you is just a very easy chart to help us understand what happens when either our key result or our KPI or essentially the metric status is a certain color, and then the initiative status is another color. I like red, yellow, green because it's super simple. Red essentially means we're behind the mark. Either we didn't complete it or we're behind the number of hours that we want to have. Yellow is we're making progress, but we're not quite there. And green is either we've accomplished it or we're exceeding our expectations for where we think we need to be at this point of the year. So we're, you know, really confident that we can meet this goal. So when both are green, the metrics are green and we've completed the initiatives, that's, you know, a sign that we can keep up the great work and we're on the right track. When our metrics are in the red, meaning we're behind our target, but we have, you know, been very diligent in accomplishing the tasks or making the shifts that we did in our stop, start, continue, grow exercise. We can use that curious mindset to say, what do we need to adjust and what have we learned over the course of the past month? If our metrics are green and we have not been accomplishing our work as we wanted to, we can ask if we're selling ourselves short. Usually that means that the metrics we set for ourselves are maybe not ambitious enough and we can be a little bit more aspirational because we aren't doing, you know, what we committed to, but we're still on track from a metrics perspective. And then when both are red, we can ask, you know, do we need to be a little bit more realistic? Are we heading towards burnout? You know, what's blocking our progress and what do we need to change here to be able to get the result that we want? And I will again say all of this is difficult. It does take time, but the one very simple tip that I would give all of you is just to incorporate this into discussions more frequently. You know, a lot of teams will carve time out maybe once, twice, if they're lucky, 4 times a year to talk about overall goals and metrics and how we're trending and, you know, how the metrics component is related to the overall vision and high level inspirational goals for the law firm. But I'd recommend that we have those discussions at least on a monthly basis, if not, you know, weekly or every other week to say, okay, you know, Sarah, what did you do this week? And let's, you know, talk about how you were able to make progress. Where do you have challenges and roadblocks? What do we need to commit to next week? Okay, Caitlin, same for you. What did you do? How are you feeling about it? What do our metrics look like? What do we need to adjust? So just making those conversations a little bit more frequent helps weave that curious component into the discussion because we're constantly adjusting, asking questions, and then iterating again when we get more information. So I do have one last slide that I will share with you. Well, there's two final pieces. One is just practical tips for maintaining momentum. And these are 7 tips that you don't have to follow all of them, but that I have found helpful to just continue to keep your eyes on forward progress throughout the year. Some very simple things. And then the last piece is kind of just a reminder in how to drive accountability, whether that's internally or for each other. So you probably heard during the exercise, I'd ask some more specific questions. So that's where that define is really important. What is it? What does success look like? Communicating is also extremely important. So we can be very clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Having that frequent touch point to assess, and then continuing to take actions to chip away at that goal. So for you all, you might break the 1900 hours down to targets per month, or even if you want to get really granular, targets per week. And then you can discuss, here's what I met this week, or here's what I met this month, here's what I did. And then based on what's red, what's green, what's yellow, where do I need to go from here? And that is all that I have for today. I do not have a hard stop right at 9:45 Central. So if you all have questions and want to hang on for a little bit, I'm happy to do so. But I want to be respectful to all of your time. So you are welcome to jump off. And if you do have questions or comments or want more information, I can hang on for a couple more minutes, or you can certainly contact me via email.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. This was incredibly helpful and really great framing and really great perspective to have, especially as we, as Katarina said, move into some new pretty strict goals that the firm has set for us. Middle of our crop here.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. I think so we're about to meet as a group in a few minutes, and there's some really, I think, great takeaways we can incorporate into our regular meetings about the check-ins that you suggested. So excited.
Yes, and I will send you all the slides, and there's some links in here at the very end to a couple of other tools if you want to just view, continue to learn. And yeah, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all. It was nice to meet those who I have not met. This is a great way to start my day.
Same for us.
Same.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.